Good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. It's a quasi nice day out there, but for fall, I think it's a good day. Want to welcome you here. I'm going to get started in just a second. I did want to share whoops, didn't mean to do that. Meant to do that. I did want to share just a quick tip for success for those showing up early and on time. If you haven't seen me say this before, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. Those are, that is my favorite, all-time favorite business book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. Been reading it for more than a couple of decades. And do me a favor, in the chat, make sure, tell me whether you can see the words the right way. But inside of there is habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. And that relates to today's training about call plans that we're going to go into in a minute. Stephen Covey talks about if you want to succeed at all the stuff that's in front of you that you got to get done, look at the end, begin with the end in mind. What do you want that end to look like? And so today we're going to be talking about meetings and successful meetings, et cetera. And so you're obviously trying to think to yourself, this is what I want going forward. So my tip for you though, is just to read this, read 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. We got the end of 2025 here. 2026 is coming up. It is a great book that gives you really foundational skills to succeed all across government contracting and frankly, in our personal lives. So that book again is 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. Okay, so let's get started. Speaking of that, second habit, begin with the end in mind. The end in mind for today is to talk about successful sales calls and how you can have more of these, or maybe begin to even start having them. And I'll talk about this more in a second, but I'm wondering if this sounds familiar to you, right? This training certainly is for you if it does sound familiar, where you've heard people talk about it's not what you know, it's who you know. The whole idea in federal government about relationships are key. You may have heard people talk about, well, you have to have relationships, or you hear about people having success. It's like it's built on relationships and you see where they go forward on it. Frankly, when I had my last company, my whole success was based on relationships. I was just good at sales. And so I had relationships and I could move from one customer to the next. I knew how to navigate them and I built upon my relationships, giving and taking, right, in a relationship. It wasn't until I sold my company in 2017 that I really started documenting the process of how did I build relationships? How did I enable my success through those relationships? But you've probably heard this, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know. And it really is a huge portion of that. Frankly, people can't even know what you know until they know of you. There's a line out there that says people buy from those they know, like, and trust. Like and trust come afterwards. First, they have to know of you. And, so having relationships just really enhances that. As I've been doing training, and I've done over 1,000, almost 1,000 trainings in the last 3-4 years here on LinkedIn and YouTube. And the biggest challenge I've seen over the tens of thousands of businesses I have helped, the biggest challenge for their success is really establishing and maintaining those relationships, right? Being able to get in the door with federal buyers, get in the door with teammates, and have a discussion that leads to growth in that relationship. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. I really believe that is the foundational piece that's missing for most small businesses to move from not having the success that you want to having the success you want. And so we're going to dive into that and talk about it. Today, I'm going to break up the training into 3 sections for how to have successful meetings with federal buyers or in the federal market with industry partners as well. The first thing I want to talk to you about is success begins with clear objectives. The second thing I'll talk about is setting a unified purpose between you and the person you're meeting. And then you need to control the meeting. And so that's the third thing I'm going to wrap up with, is give you some guidance on how you can control a meeting. I don't know if you've ever been to a meeting where you feel like you're not in control. They're just stepping on you, or they're just, I call it word vomit, but they're just saying all this stuff to you and much of it or something. And I want to be able to teach you to control that meeting with no matter who you're meeting. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about that. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I am the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, founder of Call Plan AI, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner after I got out of the Army. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we have repeatable, predictable results. This is what I want for you. And this is why I come back over and over again. This is what I hope to give you in today's training around successful sales calls. If you haven't followed me on LinkedIn, join 42,000 other people and follow me on LinkedIn. I put out content constantly that you would value. Today, I just put out a post. It's a long form LinkedIn article on my newsletter, which is the other thing I would tell you to subscribe to. And in there, I just put my Win Themes Masterclass. It's 15 lessons. It takes about an hour, but it's 15 lessons about how to have a good win theme that guides your sales activities and your proposal activities. So go ahead and check that out. But when you follow me, that's the type of content I provide for free out there, is stuff that's going to help you succeed in the federal market. One other thing, since I see from the great Pacific Northwest, David Waltz, Deputy Small Business Programs, Naval Undersea Water or Warfare Center. Man, Dave, why can I not get that correct? One day I'm just going to say your thing over and over again. Anyways, David is from the Navy. He's what I call a federal buyer, right? Not on the industry side. And one of the things you want to do for sure is go connect with him on LinkedIn or follow him. And in the top right-hand corner of his profile, it's got a little bell icon. Click on it and say, show me all. He's constantly dropping source to sought notices, etc. I hear people say, how do I hear about opportunities? Well, you got no excuse if you're trying to sell the Warfare Center in Keyport there. So connect with Dave and follow him and track on that. And then connect with each other. One last thing is just, this is your network, right? So engage with the network. Don't bombard my chat, but connect with each other, right? Make sure you use just a few key words that help people understand whether it makes sense to connect with you. All right, let's get rocking and rolling. So when you think about a meeting that you're going to go to, every meeting is a sales meeting. It doesn't matter whether you're meeting with a teaming partner or a federal buyer. If you're in industry, it's a sales meeting. You're building the relationship, which is part of sales, or you're pursuing details around an opportunity. That's part of sales, obviously, right? So every meeting is a sales meeting. And there's two types of meetings you can have. You can have a great meeting where everybody loves everybody, or you can have a successful meeting where you actually move the sale forward, you actually move the relationship forward. Great meetings suck. There's no point in having a great meeting where everybody loves everybody, because it's a waste of your time. You've got personal life. You could be with your family. You could watch Netflix. Anything would be better than having a great meeting. A successful meeting is what you want. You want to go into a meeting where it's successful for the other person and it's successful for you, meaning you both have some sort of outcome that is good for you. I always like to ask people, what's your measurement of success in here? But it begins with having objectives, setting objectives. And an objective is a selfish statement, is what I'm putting here. A selfish goal for the meeting. It's totally okay for you to be selfish in a meeting. I'm going into this meeting. Why am I having this meeting? Even this training that you're doing today is quasi meeting. What's your selfish goal? Your selfish goal maybe is to understand some tips that will help you have better meetings. My selfish goal could be to increase my trust with you as an expert in the GovCon space or something, right? A selfish goal for a sales meeting is something you keep to yourself, but it's your measurement of success in that meeting. You're trying to establish, before you even have the meeting, why am I having this meeting? What do I want out of this meeting? You definitely want to keep that other person in mind, but after you keep yourself in mind. I had this conversation with my wife about dinner. It's like, where do you want to go out to dinner? No. You decide where you want to go out to dinner. I'll decide where I want to go to dinner. We can have a conversation about it, right? But one way or another, we both know the outcome is coming in this direction. And so an objective for you, and I'll give some examples in a second, but an objective to you is your selfish goal. And if you're a boss, you should be holding your subordinates accountable to this. What did you get out of this meeting that you didn't have before? And so you need to think about that, because if you're trying to build a relationship, there's certain objectives you would set in that meeting. If you're trying to move an opportunity forward, you're doing capture, right? There's certain things you want to do. Like maybe you don't have a copy of the PWS from the last contract. That's my objective or something. Maybe you don't know the task areas. That's my objective. But it must move the sale or the relationship forward. That's the measurement of a clear objective, one that's going to work for you. And that objective is what determines whether your meeting is going to be successful or just a great meeting. So let me give you some examples here on objectives that you're setting. And this is the very first thing you need to do before you, when you're doing your meeting planning, right? After you've got an agreement for a meeting in a week or 2 weeks or something, the first thing you do is set the objectives. So I put a couple of examples here. This first one came from, well, actually, I mean, a lot of us have been doing it for a while, but agree to teaming on a specific opportunity. So if I'm setting a meeting with an industry partner, my objective is I want to get, I want to become a teammate. I want to get an agreement to be teaming on an opportunity. Well, I was working with Keith, who's in Call Plan AI, and he's a friend of mine as well. And he and I were working on a meeting that he was going to have with a couple of senior people. And we were setting the objective. And his objective, his first start was, well, I want to find some teaming opportunities. And what I told him was that's too vague, because first off, you might get stuff you don't want. And he had this list of many different opportunities, 10 or 15 opportunities. And I was like, well, do any of them ring true better than others? Any that you want more than others? Said, oh, yeah, these two. Which one of those is the most important? And he pointed it out. He's like, this one would be awesome if we got that with them. And so what I said to him was, forget about everything else. Your objective, the way you state it, your selfish goal for this meeting is to get them to agree to team with you on this particular opportunity. That's an objective for a meeting. When I go in, that's my objective. And everything I do, and I'll talk more about this in a minute, everything I do in the meeting is going to be driving towards that objective. And the follow-on one that I had him say in there is, because he knew that he wanted that opportunity to team with that other company, I always tell people create a primary and a secondary objective. If you get your primary, what's your second thing that you want? Or if you miss your primary, what's your second? In this case, we're pretty confident he'd be able to hit his first if he did it right. And so his secondary objective that I said was vitally important in here was an agreement, a verbal agreement in that meeting that he was going to have on what the work share split was going to be. Whether it was going to be percentage, you get 20%, I get 80% type thing, or task area, you take task area 1, 3, 7, and 9, and I'll take the other ones, right? Kind of thing, right? Knowing what that is, and it's not that hard to drive forward if you have it. Anyways, long story short, he had a meeting that was set for an hour. In the first 15 minutes, he did the entire objectives. He achieved them all, and they loved it. They were like, oh my God, we moved forward so fast. And it wasn't because I taught anything magic. I just had Keith determine what he wanted, right? Coming out of this. And Keith's got 20 years of experience. It's just for all of us, me too, we get distracted sometimes. And when you set an objective, it helps the other person and me stay focused on what do I want out of this meeting. A couple other examples, like with teaming partners, my objective is to get an NDA started. Here's a really important thing to understand. If you ask a company doing 3 to 5 million or less for an NDA, anybody in that company is probably going to throw you a form and go, there you go, right? We all just sign them. And, for the most part, that's how it works. But if you look to a large company, a large prime contractor, and you want to get an NDA out of it, it's not the business developer that you're talking to about an opportunity. It's their legal department and maybe their boss is like, I don't know if we want to sign another NDA here. It's a commitment on the largest part to write an NDA to you. Just the NDA in their heads is a commitment. And so when I go in, I'm setting an objective of, I want to get an NDA in place with Booz Allen. If I can get this in place with Booz Allen on this opportunity, that is a written agreement to move the relationship forward. Nothing more, right? It just means we're going to keep talking, but it's a commitment on their behalf. And so now I'm moving forward. Now they see me separate than other people who don't have NDAs. And so you have to think inside of the meetings you're going to, what's the objective I want out of this meeting? Another example is schedule the next meeting. This is actually something I never put as an objective because it's a mandate for every meeting I ever have is to schedule the next one. But for you, it absolutely is an objective, right? Your secondary objective, if you're wondering what to do, especially when you're trying to pursue relationships, opportunities are a little different. But when you're trying to pursue information or relationships, you want to have that follow-up. And I'll talk about this in a minute. But so an objective could be, I'm going to schedule that meeting. And I don't mean we agree to meet again. I'm like, hey, David Waltz, why don't you look at your calendar and why don't we pick a date right now? David, no. And so we get it in there, right? I make a point of trying to engage with them. And the last one is get an introduction. Here's the last example is if I'm going into, let's use David Waltz again. I'll just keep using him as my example today. But if I have a meeting with him, my objective is to not learn everything he has to say. My objective is to get him to introduce me to the CTO of Keyport, division, right? I want to meet the CTO and I want to be able to expand more on some ideas and innovation that's coming down from the Department of War, whatever, right? And so my objective is to get that introduction. So I need to know who I want to get introduced to. And then in a minute, you'll see everything I'm doing in the meeting is driving towards that point. And I'll try to remember that example. So I'll give you some examples of how to drive towards that. But so if you understand what I'm saying, that the first thing you got to do for meeting success is to determine your selfish objective. Just because it's selfish does not mean you won't also think about them and go, how do I make it successful? But you got to know what really will move this forward for your company. Put objectives rock in the chat if you understand what I'm saying there. All right, and while you're doing that, I want to start talking about setting a unified purpose. And so the objectives are selfish, and especially when I say selfish, I mean keep it to yourself. This is what you and your colleagues or whatever said, this is what I want out of this meeting. And I don't really need to communicate it to the other person, right? I'm driving towards that. But a purpose statement, when I do call planning, I set a purpose, and the purpose is a mutual agreement to what we're doing in this meeting. And so it's the purpose of the meeting. I don't know if I'm saying this later, but I like to say right at the beginning, I don't know if you've ever heard me teach this, but when I have a meeting and you start a meeting and you got these little chit chat for a second, hello, hey, good to see you. And then what I like to do is use an icebreaker that's related to whatever we're going to talk about. And the idea is to just talk about, like, if it's David Waltz, I might say, hey, I saw you were at that conference. How'd it go for you? Right? Instead of going, hey, you're out there in the Northwest. You ever go to the fish market in Seattle? That has nothing to do with what I want, my objective, right? But if I say, how is that objective? He's going to talk for, I don't know, 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds. Oh, it's great. A lot of people came up and we really value going to those things. Cool, right? And then I move on and I go, that's awesome, right? I don't continue the conversation. It's called an icebreaker, right? But then I move into this purpose statement. I'm like, fascinating, David. Do you mind if I share the purpose of the meeting, how I see it, and see if it aligns with what you want as we go forward? When you say, do you mind if I share the purpose of the meeting as I see it, and any words that you want to use, but do you mind if I share the purpose of the meeting? Everybody, not almost everybody, everybody's going to go, sure, right? Even the ones who hate you want to see you fail by telling them the purpose that they can beat down. No one's ever going to do that. But my point is, everybody will want to hear what you think the purpose of the meeting is. And the reason for saying this at the beginning is a couple of things. One is I want to get agreement to the purpose of the meeting. And I'll use some examples in a second. The other is I'm starting to get yeses in sales, which, let me remind you again, everybody is in sales. When we have these meetings, it's sales. And sales is about getting yeses, not nos, right? And no's are not the end of the world, but the idea is you want yeses. And if you can go into a meeting and get somebody to say yes, and they're saying yes, then as you move forward in more of your things, the desire to say yes stays there, right? I'm not here to debate sales thinking, but yes is a good thing at the beginning because they're there. They're collaborating with you on establishing the purpose of the meeting. And it also puts a roadmap in their head, right? If I say the purpose of the meeting is to do this, this, and this, how does that sound to you? I think it sounds great. Well, what they also said in a more broader way is, sounds great. What you laid out, your roadmap is perfect. I'm ready to follow the yellow brick road, right? And so now they're going to follow along in the meeting to what you said. You're getting approval to follow that roadmap that you just laid out. And it's a roadmap that you're designing for their success and ours, right? I was stuck with yours. But even with David Waltz, right? If I want to meet with a CTO, I'm thinking about him as well. Part of his success factor might be he doesn't want to introduce me to the CTO if I don't do technology, if I'm a brand new company who's really not that innovative. These are things that not only embarrass him maybe, but waste his time and the CTO's time. Compared to, like, one of his colleagues once told one of my customers, if you go away and do this, I'll make that introduction, right? And so everybody's kind of getting on that same page. Let me use an example here of a purpose statement. And I talked about how you transition out of an icebreaker, out of that really initial 1 to 2 minute beginning of a meeting chit chat into the purpose. And so I might say something like, the purpose of the meeting, as I see it, is a brief introduction of our company, learn more about you, and see if it makes sense to have a follow-up meeting. Right? That's just one example of a purpose statement. But basically, the purpose of the meeting is to share a little bit about us, learn a bit more about you, and talk more about the data analytics priority that was in the strategic document. Right? Whatever the purpose is that you have, this is the direction you're trying to go. This is counter to not having a purpose at all. Why don't we just get started? Okay, we're getting started, but what's the meeting for? Like, where are we going? And whether you know this or not, you and the other person will feel kind of lost. And so anything that is energetic, and this goes back to what a great meeting is, a great meeting will be people talking about things and it's exciting, but none of it actually moved you forward the next step. And that's what you always want to do, is move forward just one step, maybe two, but you definitely don't want to move whole different verticals in different directions. And so coming back on a purpose, right? The purpose is to get agreement and alignment around what we're going to talk about, but also to get them to realize you're in control, which is the next slide, right? Is to realize you're in control and you're going to walk them down this roadmap in order to have a successful meeting. I want to respect your time, and I want us both to get the most value out of it. So, that's why I'm doing this purpose. Just as a reminder, do you mind if I share the purpose of the meeting with you just to make sure we're on the same page? Yeah, go ahead. Purpose of the meeting is a brief introduction of our company, learn more about your organization, and see if it makes sense to have a follow-on meeting, right? And by the way, see if it makes sense to have a follow-on meeting. I'm teeing up the fact that I'm probably going to ask you for that secondary objective, which is a follow-on meeting. So they all kind of line together. Throw purpose rocks in the chat. If you understand, you need to establish the purpose of the meeting at the beginning of any meeting. While you're doing that, I'll just say a quick little story. Somebody who's in Call Plan AI with me, Nina, was really eye-opening to me because she loves how this works on the sales side of the business. She's like, can we use this in like internal meetings as well? And it's like 100%. The whole idea of going into a staff meeting, for example, hey, here's the purpose, and she having in her head, here's the objectives or something. That's all just good meeting handling. Here, I'm using it for sales to be able to move the sale forward. But, setting a purpose of a meeting is fundamental to any meeting success, really. Hey, I just want to thank Voltron for sponsoring our daily lives. I really appreciate their support. And they value putting this out. They collaborated with me on that Win Theme Masterclass I told you I put out. Voltron is an AI proposal writing platform, and they help you go from solicitation to a rapid draft within minutes instead of weeks. And this is really good as you take more time to understand, like if you're focused on the War Department, how your response is going to align to the War Department. The more time you spend thinking about them and less about the compliance of writing a proposal, the better. And that's what Voltron does. It's really take the 80% of the busy work out of the way so that you can really do the creative work to win proposals. So thanks a lot to Voltron. Throw Voltron rocks in the chat, or just thank you, Voltron, into the chat if you would. Let them know we appreciate them. Okay, so I got 5 minutes left, and let's talk about controlling a meeting. So controlling a meeting is not a bad thing. If you ever get into a car, you don't want there to be nobody in control. You don't want there to be confusion about who's in control in a car. But basically, you want somebody in control, person behind the steering wheel, right? And in a meeting, it's the same thing. You want control. Otherwise, that meeting's going to steer and crash and fiery ball and kill us all. I don't know. Maybe it's not that bad. But a meeting that doesn't have control isn't going to be good for anybody. It certainly is not going to be successful for you. And so you want to take control of a meeting. And there's two ways to take control. There's this administrative thing that I'm talking about. Some of these things like saying, here's the purpose statement. There's also another type of control where people start looking at you as the authority. I teach that, and you can learn that later. But that is like in the way you ask questions. And so I'm going to try to touch on it in a second. But control in a meeting begins with a purpose statement. Actually, if you haven't tracked on this, control in the meeting begins at the very first thing you say as like an icebreaker. If I say, David says, oh, hey, Neil. And I said, hi, David. Hey, you know what? I saw you on a podcast the other day. It was great. How'd you like doing that? I instantly took control of the meeting, so it didn't go off track. I'm still talking to things with him about I mean, talking with him about things that he would, appreciate talking about. Yeah, I was proud of that. I'm talking with things that are going to be related to what the meeting's about, right? But I took control. And then from that, I went into the purpose statement, and I took control of the meeting by saying, do you mind if I establish the purpose, or just get an agreement on the purpose? And so now I've got everybody, whether it's 2 people or a handful of us, all of us saying, yep, that sounds good. We're all on board. And now everybody's aligned. So I took control just to get us moving forward. Again, I'm not the big boss of the meeting. Just somebody needs to drive the car. There could be all sorts of backseat drivers. That's totally acceptable. But somebody's got to get us going, And when you do that, you start moving forward like that, you've got control of the meeting so that it can go towards success for you. And if you're caring about the other person, you can have a general idea of what would be successful for them as well. And so then it continues into sharing what I call guiding questions. These are sales questions. These are questions that you're trying to discover something with the other party. If I use Keith and that opportunity he was going after, and he was trying to team up, some of those questions are, have you already established your team? What are your strength and weak areas, right? We think we covered down on these 3 task areas on that opportunity. How does that align with what you guys were looking at on the task area? By asking 5 or 10 prepared questions that are driving towards your objective, it helps you achieve your objective. So if I want to find out, if I'm trying to establish a teaming agreement, remember I said with Keith, my objective is to get an agreement to be on the team and then maybe a teaming share split. Well, I just gave you a couple of questions on that already, right? I might ask more questions that are trying to solidify in their head that I'm the right one to be on the team, and not just kindly and nicely, but they see me as a partner. So I might ask questions like, hey, I know I'm thinking you would be priming because you'd be a better company to prime than us. If we team together, how could we best help you on capture? Like, we have a lot of relationships and we already do a lot of digging. We don't want to just sit on the side. How could we help you? How would you envision that happening? And now getting them to talk about how we might help them on their team. The only way they can do that is if they're visualizing me being on their team and how I'm helping. When we get into proposal writing, how do you prefer to work with companies, subcontractors and teammates? How do you prefer to work with companies like that on the split, right? And so I'm working my way through, and I'll ask questions about the task area as I try to line up that I want 40%, but I'm willing to take 20. Well, I might make sure I know those opportunities, and I might speak to the strength of them. But all of these are driving towards that objective I set with Keith, which is to get the other company or person to agree to put me on their team. And then to also sit there and get an agreement about, hey, I think we're looking at these kind of task area splits or work share splits, right? And then at the end of the meeting, I always save time for a recap, and I'm not teaching this today, but the end of the meeting, you just repeat back to people, hey, this is really exciting. I'm looking forward to us teaming together on this opportunity. If it's all right with you, I'm going to send an email, just recap what I think we talked about, even if they got AI meeting minutes. And I just want to clarify, I think what we're tentatively thinking, which gives them a way to kind of back out, but tentatively thinking is that you would cover down on task areas 1 through 4, and we would do 5 and 6. Does that sound like what we were talking about? Yep, sure does. It's like, okay. And then I'm able to follow back up. And remember, my last objective was, let's schedule a meeting, right? Let's circle back around. Let me do some research. Why don't you look at your calendar right now? Let's get something out there for a week or 2 out. So just running out of time here, I want to leave you with 3 thoughts here. The first one is, when you're thinking about having a successful meeting, it's based on having an objective. So determine your objectives, and those objectives achieved means you had a successful meeting. And then make sure you set a mutual purpose for the meeting, not just set it where you understand what you think it's going to be, but then communicate it with them as you talk with them at the beginning of a meeting. That gives you initial control, and you can control the meeting the rest of the way with those prepared questions. And the questions, by the way, I didn't say this, but they're designed to just be there for reference for you. You're not trying to be a detective in a crime case or something. You're using them as just a way to remind you of the things you want to talk about, so you don't go off and start talking about things that are unrelated to your objective. They just give you a way to come back to the center. Hopefully this makes sense to you. Tomorrow's training, I didn't mention this, but it's FPDS intro. I really want to dive into some of these tools that are the basics of government contracting. I know some people think they're basic, but I've just watched too many people with 10 years plus experience and really not understand the power. So I'm going to start going back to the basics on this training tomorrow. So if you want to know how FPDS can help you, follow up on that. And if you're looking to figure out how to have more of these successful meetings, join me over on Call Plan AI. Remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. Part of the process is ending on time. It's 12:30. I'm out of here.